My name is Robb Rasmussen. I lead marketing for NTT Data Corporation. I think the biggest challenge for us was collectively understanding how long this pandemic would last. When we first started it, maybe the early part of March, middle part of March, we were thinking maybe a couple of months. A couple of weeks went by and it got even more profound global. A number of things we had to change. We have a large part of our delivery organizations that are remote. They may be 20 or 30,000 people across India, maybe 20 or 30,000 south of Italy, south of Spain. How can we get those people to work remotely from their homes when they're designed to work in big centers of 500 to 2,000 people at a time? So we took quite a bit of, I don't want to say it took quite a bit of time, but we had to react pretty quickly to have most of our delivery be able to provide the same kind of service with clients from their homes, which was a tremendous effort on our part, and to do it in a matter of days. So that was one thing we had to do. I think the second thing we had to do is figure out how we could effectively communicate with clients in a real-time basis on the basic things like their delivery. How could we ensure delivery was still going? You had a lot of clients that were struggling with just Wi-Fi at the time, getting connectivity, learning themselves how to work from home. How can we connect ourselves from home with our clients working from home? Became quite a challenge as we looked at that. I think that some of the things we probably learned is many things that we didn't think we could do in short periods of time, we learned very quickly we could. And clients, equally so, things that they'd normally take 6 to 9 to 12 months to do, they were doing it in 2 or 3 months out of necessity. And so we learned quite a degree of how quickly we could work. How could we actually do things that we never thought was possible in the past? How could we actually work with a prospective client we've never met before? How could we engage with them virtually, build trust, figure out what their needs were, document their requirements, prove our capabilities, showcase what we could do, and win a contract all virtually? And that became a tremendous effort for pretty much everyone in the globe. As I think back, it was different by industry and by country. And it changed over time. Certain countries were really hard hit. So industries were pretty hard hit in the pandemic by country. Some clients or prospects we dealt with that were pretty technically advanced could adapt quickly. And they were moving quite quickly to change their business models. And they were able to do things with technology in their business models that other clients couldn't do as quickly. And I remember a lot of clients who used to talk with him about transformations. I laugh at the word. That was usually a multi-year process. We found clients doing that in days, weeks, and months. Things, like I said before, they didn't think they could do, doing very quickly. I remember one client in particular, we were dealing with a rollout of a module for SAP SuccessFactors. And we'd done it in about 4 of the 7 countries, 4 of the 8 countries we were supposed to do it in. It's a very on-site intensive process to roll out an application like SAP. We were about 4 countries through the 8 countries when the pandemic hit, and everybody pretty much went to their corners, started working from home. No travel was allowed, and the client in 4 countries. And we really didn't think we could do that remotely. The client didn't think they could do that remotely either. We got it done in less time and a higher degree of quality than we thought. And I think as I look back on that, it had to do with more frequent interactions with the client. Quicker meetings, but much more frequent. And when you have a frequent meeting, quite often you got to be really crisp on your communications. What you put on a document or a PowerPoint has to be very easy to understand, crisp. And so I found that this frequent yet less lengthy meetings were much more helpful in closing business and getting things done. And so as we went through that process, it's kind of the same way with other clients. You had to be pretty crisp in your documentation, tight agendas, pretty respectful of people's time and their situation in their business or in life. So this pandemic, while it was a big impact on businesses, what many people forget is sometimes we're dealing with our employees or clients who may be going through their own personal challenges. They could have had more challenges than we knew, but they were carrying on their business. So how can you have some degree of empathy and also have some degree of encouragement to get this thing done as quickly as possible, a sense of urgency, while still respecting that things could be going on in business or personal to make it challenging. But we got that done. I think what will change forever with that client and possibly for us, you actually do remote. And I think, like many things with the pandemic, I think there'll be big changes within our sector, the IT sector, that will be led by this pandemic and forever change how we deal with clients, prospects, our own employees. So I think it's going to make some long-lasting impacts in our business. Early on, we were really thinking what a challenge it is to, I'd say, win new logos for clients you've never had a chance to actually personally or physically meet. And so early on, maybe 4 months into the pandemic, we were starting to prepare for our annual leadership conference, which is where we usually get maybe 175 of the top leaders of NTT Data together for a couple of days someday or sometime in a room. And about halfway through, we realized that wasn't going to be a reality. So we decided to create kind of a virtual conference. And at that time, we were trying to think, what is the most relevant thing we could talk about virtually for 8 or 10 hours pre-conference? We came on this topic about how can we capitalize on today's realities. We knew there were a lot of challenges, new logos, existing clients, how do we deal with our own employees? People were saying, how can we take this situation and make it a learning experience? How can we capitalize on some of the situations? Part of that was we were all kind of equal. All providers had to engage virtually. So the game was, how can you be a little bit more engaging? How can you be a little bit more personal? How can you actually be a little bit more creative on the calls? And we found that there were a number of tactics we learned and we shared in this virtual global conference. And creativity was a big factor. I remember one client in the UK, a large auto company, we'd never met them. The challenge was they had 2 incumbents, and we were competing for the business due from the 2 incumbents. And they wanted delivery from about 7 locations outside of, in this case, the UK. So coming together, this team globally. One thing the pandemic taught us is we can have access to any technical capabilities or industry capabilities we've got anywhere in the world since it's remote. One advantage is we could dial in anybody to talk about, in this case, this client's business from any other location we got in the world. So that became an advantage. We also found over time with prospects in particular, they started kind of formal. Cameras were off. As time went on, cameras came on. People became a little bit more guardless. Guards were going down. Kids were jumping in the background. Dogs were barking. Deliveries were being made. And you found yourself in a situation where you could become a bit more intimate with this prospect. You were invited into their home, so to speak. Not so formal in a boardroom where you had to wear a tie, sitting there stoic and formal. A little bit less guarded from that perspective. And we wanted to make sure we were a little bit more less guarded as well, a little bit more creative in our approach. And so we'd always do the careful thing, the introductions with everybody. We tried to make sure that all are concise. If the meeting started at a certain time, we were on time. I think we all learned together how to not talk over each other. Talk you couldn't hear, but as the technology evolved and we learned more how to interact in this kind of setting, I think we became more capable of interacting and respecting the people that were talking. I think the other thing we learned is because the time was a little bit more precious, you had to be really prepared for those calls. Make sure you understood exactly what the prospect wanted. Be very clear on how you provided the answers or request to that client. That became very important. So we spent a lot more time, I think, in preparation of those sessions because they were likely shorter and more frequent. So that was a positive thing. I remember as we went through this process, as we finally won, we tried to figure out with the client, how did we win? We always talk about our business as a people-intensive business. We talk about the fact that we've got 130,000 employees across the company. Where it was all analog or physical, prospects and clients couldn't meet even a portion of those 130,000 people. But in this more virtual world, you have the opportunity to, first of all, see more people within the client site, have access to various people in different divisions. Equally so in our organization, since it's virtual, via Zoom or WebEx or something like that, they can have access to some of the depth we've got of the 130,000 employees. They can actually see we're truly global. Our auto companies in Europe, the 3 big German autos, they'd like to talk to somebody in Japan that services Toyota in Japan. So it does really help make the world even appear more flat than it is. We're interconnected. And I think it's that opportunity to show the capabilities we've got globally to the clients is a really good attribute brought on by this tragic pandemic. In our business, many times clients buy, not just for the sales executive or the team, they want to buy from the delivery people that are actually going to make it happen in their organizations. But it's quite hard to bring in all the delivery talent for a client to actually meet them and see them, which is a pivot point for many clients. Are these people actually going to take my precious jewels, my IT, and make business applications work for my client, for my customers? So I think this opportunity to expose prospective clients or clients to a broader set of our delivery talents. I used to think that if we could get a client to fly to a delivery location in India, they would buy, because it's such a rich experience when you go down to India. You see the people there, the talent. But now, without the ability to travel, they were invited to India in a much different way. They could actually see all the delivery talent, meet them firsthand, get to know what they look like. So I think while I'm all for getting back together sometime, will there be questions about that? I think we will travel, certainly. But every CFO I know in any company, when you hear travel, they're going to ask the question, do we need to? Can it be done without so much travel? And a lot of people are going to worry about their health, physical condition. Can you really travel? Do you need to travel that much if it can be done remote? So I look for a kind of a hybrid world. We're a little bit more careful about travel, a little bit more cautious about doing that. Do it when you have to. But a lot of things will still remain remote, I believe. Thinking about one client in particular here in North America, the client's in the hospitality industry, which by all accounts was probably one of the most hard hit. This particular company owns hotels. And so we had a long-term relationship with them. They came to us not for something new, not for a transformation, cut costs. Now we're dealing with some cost challenges ourselves as a company, but when the client is really in deep situation with their own viability, with hotels not being leased out as much, we decided we'd really focus, like you said, on something we save them costs. So we figured out a handful of ways we could save costs, and that would save costs for the client, but it shaved into our margin as well. You got to be honest. Say it's a partnership. Some days are good, some aren't. But what we found is we worked with them to actually save costs. There were other partners they were working with that didn't do that. And so we were awarded pieces of business from those other partners they were dealing with who didn't take on the challenge to help cut costs. And we found ourselves with about the same amount of money with expanded contracts. So I think you're right. In certain cases like this pandemic, it wasn't all about new growth. It wasn't always about new capability. Transformation. In many cases was, how do we continue to survive? How can we change our business and not spend any more? So we found ourselves doing that in a number of cases while we were challenged. Our clients were as well. And it is a give and take. It's a partnership if you want a long-term relationship. So I definitely think that this is going to be a mark on companies' cultures forever. And our clients, us, we will not soon forget this pandemic. And so I think building relationships you built during these tough times, where you're able to actually help your client in ways you normally don't, where you made some challenges, sacrifices to actually help them, I don't think that'll be easily forgotten. So there's one benefit I've seen about working for a Japanese company. Unlike many US companies that are traded on the stock exchange every quarter, if you're a penny off, it's a tough reaction for the corporation. But part of the reason a Japanese company can be long-term thinking, they're not quite as stringent in the quarterly earnings. They look things longer term, maybe a year in perspective. Some clients or some companies like NTT Data are both debt and equity financed. And when you're partially debt financed, you don't have to react quite as quickly to earnings quarterly. And so our leadership in Japan is very forgiving, which played out very well during this pandemic, where we could take some longer term risks, some risks that had longer term payback. And I think that will keep our clients with us even longer. They'll remember the times were tough and who was there in the times tough. We were there for the long haul, not just for the quick profit. And so I think that'll be remembered by a lot of our prospects and clients going forward. During this time, people had to move very quickly. Decisions had to be made very quickly. They were determining on whether you survived as a client, whether you could grow, meet your needs. So it required us to be quite adaptive and make decisions at various levels where historically maybe we had done a little more formal job in going up the chain to get those approved. But both the top of the leadership and in our country leadership, we empowered a number of people to make those decisions because they were made daily. Weekly decisions had to be made on the ground because the clients needed the decision right now. They couldn't wait for a month or the next session when you all flew in. You know, they were challenged in their business and with their own employees every day. That's one great thing. I think every company learned something from this who were all equally affected pretty dramatically. Takeaways we learned is you've got to be as creative as you can with communications. It can be pretty boring on Zoom calls for hours. So creative and learn how to deal virtually in an effective way. I think we learned that probably more frequent meetings and shorter were better for people within our clients' environments. They wanted to have probably more frequent, but not so long. And when you do that frequency and kind of shorter, you've got to be very succinct in your communication. If you're going to have a dashboard, you got to be very clear on that dashboard. You got to make sure you're covering all the issues the client wants in a very effective way. So I think that's important, just the communication, frequent and shorter. I think other things we learned is, like many IT providers and many of our clients, we have to ensure that our people are healthy, happy, and engaged. And since we have about 130,000 globally, that's a lot of things we had to change internally to make sure our employees are engaged. They feel rewarded. They've got the technology they need to be able to deal with the clients and the environment in which the client's in and they're in. So we had to be, like you said, pretty empowering for leaders around the globe to get their people to feel engaged, the right technology to provide the solutions for clients, to make the decisions in a timely fashion. So a lot of trust went down from our leadership down to our people. And likewise, I saw that in our clients' environment as well. They had to push that trust down because decision-making was quicker, it seemed like, during this pandemic.